Welcome to Crossroads 307. I'm Seth Brenthaway, the host of the show. This is Jim Magagna. He's here with me. He's the vice president of the Stock Growers Association. Thanks for being with us today, Jim.
Happy to be with you,
really
Seth.
Appreciate it. Crossroads 307 is a program that discusses all things Wyoming, whether it's ag, energy, technology, environment. All of these things seem to come to a crossroads in Wyoming, and agriculture is a really big part of that. Jim, as the executive vice president of Stock Growers Association, over the last year, I've got to know you a little bit, Jim. That you're a pretty influential guy, and a lot of people really appreciate the work you do for the stock growers in Wyoming. The last episode that we had Olivia on, and she mentioned just a little bit of a few different things that you guys do for stock growers in the state. And I think today would be good to maybe delve into a little bit of that and have you kind of tell us a little more about what's up and coming and how the stock growers in a little bit more detail plays for the state as well as the association itself. So I've seen you had a few different things you here want to talk about. I'll kind of turn it over to you and tell me a little bit about how things work for Mr. Magagna.
Sure, Seth, and building a little bit on your opening comments there, I like to think of the ranching industry in Wyoming as really the foundation of what we are as a state. We don't do it alone. We're number third in terms of our economic contribution, overshadowed by tourism and certainly by the energy industry, and those are critical. But it all has to work together. And as large landowners in the state and those who kind of keep the culture together, which we've done at Wyoming Stock Growers for 148 years.
1872?
1872. Yeah. So there's a lot of issues that I work on both in the state and nationally, but always approach those from the perspective of not only what's good for the ranchers in Wyoming, but how is that good and helpful to the state of Wyoming, because we're an integral part of it.
So the legislative session's coming up. Like another 2 weeks or something. It seems like, because I think I met you about a year ago.
It's less than a week now.
Jeez, yeah, it's come by so fast. But and I think you're going out of town even today with some more stuff. But what are the kind of things that are up and coming in legislative session? I know that's one of the things you guys really try to watch and keep everybody informed on. What kind of things are on your radar?
We do, and of course this is a budget session of the Wyoming Legislature, so the focus of the legislature and all of us will be on budget items. Fortunately, as an industry, there's not a lot of things that we have our hand out for. I mean, we're generally satisfied with the current budget, perhaps a tweak here or there that we'll be looking for. But there are always other issues that are addressed as well, even though it's a legislative session. So from our perspective, 2 or 3 that we've been working on for the last year with the interim legislative committees and some even longer than that. One has to do with trespass. And we have a lot of private land that's intermingled with public land in Wyoming, and historically it was pretty hard to know where you were when you were out there in the middle of the wide open spaces.
Sure.
So our trespass law in Wyoming said that you weren't guilty of a trespass unless the land was posted or you were told to get off and you failed to do so. Well, today that has changed. One, there's a lot more recreational use. People have access to GPS and better mapping and that to know where they are. So we're seeking to balance that a little more with some legislation that puts some responsibility on the party that's out there running around to know whether they're on private land or not and whether they have permission. And with some understanding that, that's not going to be a perfect system. So that's a high priority for us in this legislative session.
That makes sense. I mean, I think to your point, at one time, you're right, I would be out. I'd have no idea, but it seems a little bit more accessible to have that kind of information to the regular Joe now, so it's not much of an excuse anymore, as I think of the idea.
I think that's exactly the way it is. Mm-hmm.
What else is coming up?
Well, another one that's important to us has to do with our relationship as surface owners with mineral interests on the land, where the so-called split estates, where I may own the surface and you may own the minerals. And that's generally been a good relationship. And the energy companies, for the most part, work very hard to work with the surface owners. But there's a little, what I would call a glitch in current Wyoming law with regards to companies bonding onto private surface. And it's a process that's important that they be able to do that if you weren't able to reach an agreement on how much they're going to pay you for access and damages, etc. But the way the current law is being applied, if you and I don't agree, the mineral developer can go to the Oil and Gas Commission and post a bond. Typically, it's $10,000, and come on the next morning.
$10,000.
$10,000 in most instances, and then they can come on the next day. And they have a week to let me know that even happened, and I have 30 days to object. Then they have time to schedule a hearing. Yeah. So the impact is already there before I, as the surface owner, have really had a chance to express my concerns and have them addressed. What we're proposing is to allow that bonding to take place, but allow 15 days for the landowner, once they receive notice, to raise concerns, not about compensation, because that can be worked out after, but if our dispute is about what road you're going to use, or where you're going to build a road on my land, or where you're going to drill a hole on my land, once that's done, it's too late to decide those issues. So some of those upfront issues could be decided before they actually come onto the land, and provide a process for that.
Yeah, and when I first heard a little bit about this issue, because I really just am kind of getting educated on everything that's been going on in the last year and a half, and this is a perfect example of a crossroads where you've got the energy industry coming together and the agriculture coming together, and you can see both sides of the argument in some ways, and I won't, maybe I'm a little partial, but it seems like that has always kind of played out in the energy companies' favor in this specific topic.
Well, and our minerals are the dominant in the state. That's well established in Wyoming. So they have an absolute right to come on my property to develop minerals that I may not own and control.
Sure.
But this is really just a matter of, with a little tweak in the process, I think we can help foster a better relationship between surface owners and those who are developing on behalf of mineral interest owners.
It'll really be interesting to see how that plays out, because right now, not right now, but for quite some time, the energy industry and the ag industry have really been kind of partners that sometimes butt heads and sometimes get along really well, but they're not really getting away from each other. They're going to be together for quite some time. And
well, we have to work together. Yeah. Given I like to use the expression with people that, when I talked earlier about ranching and agriculture being the foundation in the state, obviously our tourism industry, which is hugely important, tremendously successful, is in a large part dependent on agriculture, keeping these wide open spaces, providing habitat for wildlife. And in a similar vein, for the energy industry, I tell some of my friends in the energy industry, would you rather deal with the most cantankerous old rancher I have out there on a mineral lease, or would you rather deal with 100 people who each have 20 acres of it?
Right.
In other words, it's your advantage to help us remain viable, so that we keep these larger land holdings that are more easily dealt with in the mineral side.
Sure. And it's pretty amazing to me of how far that really spreads in all sorts of different areas. Water's a big issue, as you know, so great stuff. So you mentioned a couple of things going on in the state there. What are the federal regulatory type reforms that are kind of going on? Did you have a few of those that you guys have?
We have a lot of those right now, and it's a terribly active time in a positive way, hope for us at the federal level, and I don't recall any time in the last 25 years at least where we've seen as much activity on the regulatory front as we're seeing at the federal level. Congress may be moving slow and not doing much, but the regulatory agencies under the current Trump administration are really moving forward with proposing a lot of revisions. Most of those are revisions that we deem to be favorable to us, and so within the last 3 or 4 months we've been involved with the new regulation on waters of the U.S., the so-called WOTUS rule. We're involved right now with regulatory changes that are being proposed to the National Environmental Policy Act to make it function more effectively, efficiently, like we believe it was always intended to. But over time, so many of these federal laws are well targeted, and over time they multiply into building a bureaucracy and a process that's no longer really workable in anyone's best interest. So trying to bring those back a little bit to their target purposes, I think, is what a lot of these are doing. So National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA, is a big one for us. The Bureau of Land Management has announced their intent to revise their grazing regulations. Of course, that's right in our front yard, and in fact, they will be hosting a meeting in Casper on February 20th to take public input on that, and we certainly encourage public land grazing permittees across the state to show up and get their 2 cents worth in there. That's important that we show that we're committed to those type of things. So that's another one. We're working with the Forest Service on some reform to their NEPA regulations, also on some changes to their grazing handbook that guides the field work that they do with grazing. I'm sure there are more that I'm not recalling right now, but there's one or two of those on my plate as representing the ranching industry just at every point in time for the last couple of years.
Yeah, you mentioned NEPA, and most of the stuff you're talking about, NEPA's involved in. I mean, they have some type of issue in there.
It's involved in everything, yes.
For the average guy who's out there, because I'm from Laramie County, and I don't know how the rest of you guys out there watching may be, but in Laramie County, I really got a wake-up call after I started traveling around the state and listening to other different perspectives of what was going on in the state. And I grew up here, and I was a little bit, embarrassed to say that, man, we just really aren't that in tune with what's going on with the rest of the state. And we catch a lot of flack for it, in these other parts of the state. But
well, and I grew up in Sweetwater County, where the attitude back in those days was Cheyenne doesn't care about us.
Right, and to be honest with you,
I think that's changed a lot.
It probably has, but I personally am just like, man, I didn't really know about it, and I really wish that I had been involved a little bit more, even just from the aspect of sometimes I'm like, man, it's so flat and windy down here. What am I missing up there in the northern part of the state? But can you tell me a little, or tell the audience here a little bit about what is it that NEPA has such a big impact on? I mean, with agriculture, obviously it has an impact, but I mean, our state revenues right now are in question. We're trying to figure out what to do with coal kind of coming under attack and these kind of things. Our energy industry, we're like $1.8 billion I think was paid in taxes to the state last year. How does NEPA play such a big impact with affecting the revenue to the state in both, well, mostly as it relates to you in agriculture, but that spills over into everything. So in agriculture, I guess, if you've given a broad...
Virtually any activity that requires any type of a federal permitting has to go through the NEPA process. And the NEPA law is important. It's well intended to say, before you do this, whether it's developing a coal mine or grazing allotment, is you need to assess what the environmental impacts of that may be. But NEPA was never intended to drive the outcome. It was intended to present the picture of those impacts, and then you make a decision based on other laws and based on policies as to what action are we going to take. Over time, I think it's come more and more to drive the decision rather than to inform the decision.
Okay.
And
important distinction.
And then it's also become so burdensome. I mean,
with the bureaucracy,
NEPA documents that can take 5 to 7 years and end up being over thousands of pages, and all goes beyond what it was. And part of that, to be very honest, is because there are certain groups out there. Fortunately, most of them they're not based in Wyoming, but that pride themselves in using NEPA as a litigation tool. And there are lawsuits filed, I mean, almost daily anymore in the last couple of years, based on NEPA, and so often based on procedural matters. Well, you were supposed to have a 60-day comment period, you only had a 45-day comment period, or you failed to analyze this particular issue. Things like that just really inhibit the ability of the energy industry, of agriculture, of virtually any business to make smart business decisions and move forward in a timely manner.
Makes total sense. So I'm going to shift just a little bit here, and because I when I'm talking about agriculture and energy kind of coming together, one of the things that, as you know, that I do outside of this program is working with water in a company called Encore Grain Environmental, and last year we had, I think it was about 1.7 billion barrels of water, probably about 70 billion gallons of water that was kind of just thrown away And a lot of the environmental impacts or the environmental studies involved with NEPA or in kind of impact decisions made on what type of permitting and those kind of things that we can get for reusing that water, putting it to use for Wyoming. And so I wonder if you would maybe give some perspective from, I guess I'm looking for, it's kind of common sense in my mind, but from an agriculture perspective, how much impact it would be to be able to make use of some of that water that we've been kind of just tossing away, and how that would maybe help solidify or work in the relationship between energy and agriculture together to improve the revenue of the state, and even just in agriculture, because you said that in agriculture is like what, the number 3
Yes.
revenue
Mm-hmm.
bill. Well, if we were able to work together between energy and agriculture, we'd probably be able to boost both industries, doing good for the environment, etc. Can you touch on that a little bit, on what your thoughts are?
Well, I think the work that Encore Green is doing is certainly a step in that direction, and that's why we're excited to be working closely with you on this endeavor. Water is a precious commodity. Wyoming is more fortunate than many states. We're the headwaters of so many of our major waterways in the western U.S. that we've done fairly well. We haven't experienced, but nevertheless, we have limitations. There's only so much water available, and for those in the ranching community, our business is built around what we know we have. On average, we have this amount of water, whether it's for irrigation or whether it's for livestock water or whether it's just soil moisture that causes the grass to grow. We know that that's a limitation on where we can go. So the thought that we might be able to move that up a notch by putting some water on the land that we never anticipated having on that land is exciting for a lot of egg producers in the state. It's not going to be a good fit for everyone, but certainly it's going to be a good fit in a lot of places. And the idea that we can take water that is otherwise unusable. I mean, it's served an important function in terms of mineral production, but now get that second round of use out of that water by applying it in an appropriate manner to the soil and strengthening our forage production, strengthening our soils, enhancing carbon sequestration in those soils. All of those are important factors that provide new opportunities for a lot of our producers.
Sure, absolutely. Well, we're excited to be a part of that too, and we hope that things will keep moving forward. Just got the permit from DEQ to be able to do some land application out by Pine Bluffs, and so we're excited to keep the ball rolling in that regard. And if we can, even if we can just help a producer, have an extra crop of hay every year, that's going to make a big difference for them and being able to at least sustainability, etc. So really excited about those types of things. One of the things that, and jumping again here, but I one of the things that I talked with Olivia about in the last discussion I had with her, and I had no idea about this, but I always thought that the Stock Growers Association membership was really for stock growers, but she was mentioning that anybody can be a member of Stock Growers and support the organization and help. In what ways do you see that the average person, other than just doing a donation, I mean, are there volunteering events or things like that they can participate in for the stock growers, and how do you see those
Non-livestock producers?
Yes.
Yeah, we have some categories of membership that are just a supporting member, and the way we look at that is hopefully we've got a lot of people out there who realize the important role that the ranching industry plays in the state of Wyoming, and even on a broader basis in terms of, as I said earlier, maintaining our open space, our wildlife habitat, etc., plus providing a good, healthy food supply. And that people can show support for that by becoming a supporting member of Stock Growers Association at a very small fee. It'll enable them to get our quarterly Cow Country magazine, which helps them to be better informed about what we're working on, what we're thinking about, kind of what some of our objectives are. We don't really have a lot of specific events organized around that broader audience, but we do have some. We have I'm sure Olivia discussed our environmental stewardship program. We do an annual tour of a ranch somewhere in the state that's being honored for their stewardship.
Okay.
And that's open to the public.
Okay.
People that want to register for it. We do 2 conventions a year in different parts of the state. And while they're more focused on issues, they're open. You don't have to be a member to participate in our conventions other than to vote in our committees and our board meetings and that. So there are a lot of opportunities, and I guess my personal perspective is that we in agriculture, and particularly in the ranching industry, are a unique place to be sort of the gathering place for all interests in Wyoming, because we reach out and value our relationship with the energy industry. At the same time, we value our relationship with the conservation community, not those who file lawsuits all the time, but those who want to make a difference on the ground.
Actually want to come up with some solutions.
It's all about the resource out there and how do we sustain that resource and enhance that resource, and we do that in many ways. We can do it through energy projects, we can do it through the way we graze it, we can do it through supporting various conservation efforts. It kind of all comes together, and I believe we're in a position to bring those parties together.
Well, it certainly has been helpful, and we sort of appreciate your support in trying to even just discuss these issues. We're in the Stock Growers Association building right now, is where the studio's set up. So you've been very supportive of collaborating in that effort. And I'll say that even, you mentioned some of these environmental groups that just want to kind of sue all the time, and they don't seem real solutions oriented. But I'll say that it is true that in some of the discussions that we've had around the state right now, it seems like that might be changing a little bit. We'll cross our fingers and hope. But it seems like that we're all kind of coming together and understanding that there's some real solutions out there that we can look for rather than just gripes and complaints. And so and everybody's got them, so nobody nobody's necessarily pointing any fingers here, but at the same time, looking to those solutions, I think is paramount. And so if somebody wants to find out about the stock growers, it's WSGA.org. Okay. You can go on there, and there's actually all kinds of different information on the stock growers itself, and I think that you can even sign up on that website as well. Well, Jim, thank you so much for being on the show today.
It's been great to have the opportunity to visit with you, and really appreciate the opportunity to talk to the audience out there, and whoever they may be and whatever their interests are. I think that we have some common ground, we have some ability to work together, and the first step in all of that is better understanding where each of us come from. So the opportunity for me to talk with the public here in Wyoming about what we do at Stock Growers and what our people do every day in caring for the land and the resources and their livestock is valuable.
Well, I really appreciate you too. And anybody who looking for any other information, like I say, go to WSGA.org. And again, our sponsor for this episode is Encore Green Environmental. You can check them out at encoregreenenvironmental.com. All kinds of different information on new and upcoming exciting things going on for water reuse in Wyoming, and we really encourage everybody to take that and do something good with Wyoming's water. So again, Jim, really appreciate you coming on. Look forward to the next time.
Thank you, Seth.
Thank you.
Happy to come back.